I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The KrisAnne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come on!
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the KrisAnne Hall Show. KrisAnne Hall here, KrisAnnehall.com. Beautiful day to defend liberty. Beautiful day to understand the role of the patriot. And to understand how we preserve liberty means that we sometimes have to be controversial. We have to be politically incorrect. And I want to show you something today about our right to keep and bear arms. And our framers actually said a lot about our right to keep and bear arms. They wrote reams and reams about it. There was a debate about the Second Amendment that gives us a good understanding as to their intentions in our right to keep and bear arms. Can I mention to you that the Bill of Rights does not create your right to keep and bear arms? And without the Bill of Rights, the federal government would still have no power to regulate how you keep and bear arms, because the right to keep and bear arms was not a power to be regulated by the government. It was the power over guns was never delegated to the federal government in the original text of the Constitution. Therefore, they never had the power to have any control over it. The Bill of Rights does not give them any power, does not take any power from them, because the right to keep and bear arms is an inherent right, and a right that exists to us simply because we are. Samuel Adams said, among the natural rights. Understand what natural rights are? Natural rights are yours because you breathe, because life exists in your body. You have a natural right. You have several natural rights, many natural rights. He says among these natural rights are life. You have a natural right to life, because guess what? Nobody can give you life. Your life exists because of the laws of nature and of nature's God, because of that spark of life that existed in the womb at the time of conception. Ooh, starting off controversial. Well, sure, why not? Life begins at conception. I think that's a biological fact that cannot be disproved. And we're going to be controversial today already, so why not? Among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, life. Secondly, liberty. Government, men, and documents do not give you liberty. These are things that are yours the moment the spark of life exists. Not only do you have the right to life, liberty, you have the right to property. You see, we owned property long before we had governments. And as a matter of fact, we formed governments with the purpose of protecting our life, our liberty, and our property with collective measures, so that we wouldn't be left alone to fend off the Barbary pirates by ourselves, or the hordes, or the fiends, or foreign governments. We formed government so that we could collectively protect what was individually ours. There is no collective right outside the right of the individual. Because if I do not have the right to life, liberty, and property, and I don't have the right, as Samuel Adams says, the number 4, the right to defend them in the best means possible, if I don't individually have those rights, then government doesn't exist with those rights either. Because you see, government doesn't possess rights. Government possesses power delegated by people, based on the rights of people. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. And if I do not have a right to life, then government has no power to protect it. If I don't have the right to liberty, then government has no power to protect it. If I don't have a right to property, then government has no right to protect it. If I do not have a right to protect these things, my inherent rights, then no power in government exists to protect those things. Because government is not a sovereign entity. Government only has sovereignty when dealing with other governments. But when dealing with the people and the creators of the federal government, it has no sovereignty. Sovereignty exists only in people. People then delegated that sovereignty to their states. When they formed the Union, the states were created as sovereign and independent individuals, or individual countries, when we created them in the Lee Resolution in order to declare our independence from Great Britain. Our states were created as independent sovereigns to contradict the Crown's claim that our states were colonies. Because you see, a colony is not independent or sovereign. But states are. And so we created this independent, sovereign state, who is only independent and sovereign in the eyes of other governments. It is not independent from the will of the people. It is not sovereign over the people. And so what we have to realize now is that there is a hierarchy of government, and government only exists if rights exist in the people. And so the claim of the federal government, or even your state government, that you don't have the right to keep and bear arms, that's not an individual right, by natural law removes the claim of government to have that right. Because if I don't have the natural right to do something, then I can't delegate a power to government to do something I don't have the right to do. Because you see, government doesn't exist without me. Government doesn't exist without you. And if you don't have an individual right to do something, you can't delegate that power to the government to do it for you. And so this idea that the right to keep and bear arms is not an individual right is a ridiculous right, is a ridiculous presumption. Because if I don't have an individual right to keep and bear arms, then the government has no power to keep and bear arms for themselves. Government isn't existed to protect government. Government has existed to protect me. That's why governments are instituted among men, to protect our lives, our liberties, our properties. That is a natural law principle. It is a principle based on fact. It is a principle based on history. It is a principle based on human nature. It is a principle based upon natural law. And natural law cannot be contradicted and maintain liberty. As a matter of fact, if natural law is contradicted, the only result is tyranny. And our framers explain to us why we must have an individual right to keep and bear arms. Noah Webster, in a dissertation that he wrote called An Examination into the Leading Principles of the Federal Constitution, written in 1787. Now at this time, Noah Webster was a young man. Just to give you an idea about Noah Webster was only 17 when he joined the independence movement. And in 1787, he was 29. So we have a man who is 12 years, right? Yeah, 12 years into our independence movement, a brilliant man. And he is writing dissertations on liberty that will influence the foundation of America. You understand that our liberty movement was not by a bunch of old guys. Those white-haired pictures were portraits made of our founders after the Revolution, in their later days. The majority of our framers were under the age of 40, many of them being under the age of 30. And Noah Webster, only 29, 17 when he joined the independence movement, says, quote, "Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom in Europe." Now, the understanding that the standing army ruling over the people is a danger to our liberty was something that was very familiar to our framers. It's exactly what they lived. It was the standing army that was searching and seizing in their homes and taking control of their ships and their imports and trying to starve them out of Boston and taking the arms from the people, their lives and their liberties and their properties. And so we need to understand what this means. Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed. One of the ploys throughout history is not simply to disarm the people by force, but to disarm the people by coercion. Noah Webster is not simply saying that the standing army will rule over you by jumping up on your porch to take your guns from you. As a matter of fact, that historically is the last step after you're already disarmed. No, one of the biggest threats of a standing army ruling over you is when you are so disarmed that you cannot protect yourself, and you actually beg for the government to protect you. We saw this, and we're seeing this across the country, but we saw it very, very blatantly after the Boston bombing, when our local police force marched down the streets with the DHS looking like they were marching through the streets of Baghdad, dragging people out of their homes without warrants, using military-style weaponry on innocent homeowners. And the scariest part was the people cheering them on.
KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Boston bombing. I don't understand why that wasn't so alarming to us. Seeing our local police department look like Baghdad patrol units, looking like they were in Afghanistan or something, and marching down the streets of Boston. Marching not just down the streets, but actually going up to people's homes and dragging them out of their homes through force with no warrants. Get out, get out, get out. We got to search. No, you're not in hot pursuit. You have no idea where this guy is. You don't even really have an understanding of who he is. And yet you've seen the pictures. People terrorized by their own government out of their homes. Now, if that wasn't frightening enough, you have the mainstream media and the people in those towns cheering them on and happy for what they're doing. Happy that people having their rights violated, their right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, their right to be free from the government, looking like they're raiding a terrorist plot. Hello. That ought not happen in a civilized government where people have inherent rights recognized. But then people cheering them on. Why were they cheering them on? They were cheering them on because they had been disarmed themselves. Because they were terrified that there might be a terrorist in their home, and they had no way to protect themselves because they had already been disarmed. How were they disarmed? They were disarmed by brainwashing. They were disarmed by regulation. They had been taught that guns kill people. Don't you remember that brainwashing? Eric Holder promised us that it was going to happen.
I've also asked the school board to make a part of every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
And hasn't that exactly happened? We now believe that guns kill people. We now believe that gun-free zones make people safer, and that we have to have more gun-free zones, and we have to have more gun control and more gun regulation. Yet the statistics prove that to be the opposite. Because the effect is not supposed to keep us safer. The effect of gun control is to keep us more scared. The purpose of gun control is to keep us afraid, so that we are afraid for our own lives to the point we cannot protect ourselves, so we beg the government to protect us. And then all we need is a standing army marching down the streets to keep us safe, and we can cheer on the very tyranny that controls us. Hello, America. Is that who we want to be? A place where a standing army can rule over us because we're so disarmed, we're unable to protect ourselves? You know what, that whole scene in Boston would not have gone well in my neighborhood. I live on 2 miles of dirt road. My neighbors are all, well, I guess, sociologically classified as rednecks. And they understand the need to keep and bear arms. So if we had troops marching down our streets, if they'd have come to my house, the mainstream media would have been there not because I was cheering them on, probably because there was a big disruption. Because I'd have looked at those government agents, regardless if they were local or federal or not, and said, look, excuse me, where's your warrant? Because you're not coming in my home without a warrant. And by the way, we understand our right to keep and bear arms in this house, which means we don't need you. If there's someone in my house that doesn't belong here, I know my home better than you do, and I can shoot them myself. I don't need you to keep me safe. So go peddle your tyranny somewhere else. It's not going to be accepted here, and you are not needed, and your violation of our liberty is not welcome. And it's about time the population of America understand that their right to keep and bear arms exists, not for terrorists, but for government.
Let them steal your life. Don't let them break your stride. There is light on the other side. You'll see all the raindrops falling. It's a revolution.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
It's interesting listening to what our framers said about our right to keep and bear arms. Noah Webster said that we have to have the right to keep and bear arms to keep the standing army from ruling over us. Why? He says, because the supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword when the whole body of the people are armed and constitute a force superior to any band of troops that can be raised on any pretense in the United States. He says a force at the command of Congress can execute no laws, but such as the people perceive to be just and constitutional, for the people will possess the power, and jealousy will instantly inspire the people with the inclination to resist the execution of a law which appears to them, the people, unjust and oppressive. You see, our framers wanted to make sure that we remembered our right to keep and bear arms, not because they were afraid that we would be disarmed by the deer and the rabbits, but because they were afraid we would be disarmed by the government, and that to preserve the liberty of the people, we must be armed to the extent that we can overpower a government who will try to disarm us. And so we now live in a situation where we're being taught that we don't need this because the government can protect us. We need gun-free zones, when the statistics show that gun-free zones do not keep us safe. Do you know, in 8 attacks using firearms over the last 8 years, gunmen opened fire in places where law-abiding citizens were disarmed by policies that treated law-abiding citizens like criminals. Law-abiding citizens cannot possess firearms in gun-free zones, and it's the law-abiding citizens who will abide by those policies and laws. And the results of 8 attacks in the last 8 years in gun-free zones, 105 innocent lives taken, and more than 150 others injured by gunfire in gun-free zones. Because we forget that gun-free zones are not gun-free for criminals. We've just simply disarmed the law-abiding citizens and eliminated their ability to protect themselves, which makes them easy targets. That's the whole purpose. To keep us scared. To keep us victims. So we will beg for the standing army to rule over us. The interesting thing is that these sources of our terror are actually marked out and identified in advance by our government. Do you know how many of these terrorists were actually identified and followed by the FBI before they opened fire on us? How many of them were actually actively being monitored by the FBI? In the Boston bombing, an agent, a federal agent, tracked these guys. And the federal government said, you must stop tracking them. Stand down. Let them go. How many of these attacks have been done with the negligence, and I'll boldly say permission, of the federal government? Now look, we knew about the Garland shooter. The federal government knew about the Garland shooter. The federal government was speaking to the Garland shooter over social media, tracking the Garland shooter. And now we are coming to the information that the Garland shooter was armed by our government. Yes, the Garland shooter, Nadir Hamid Sufi, bought his firearm from a fast and furious gun dealer. I want you to realize what's going on here. I don't care how you connect the dots. I am giving you the facts. The only time a standing army can rule over the people is when the people are disarmed. And the people are disarmed by brainwashing. And then the government influences terrorists and arms terrorists. These are not conspiracy theories. These are facts of conspiracy of our government to arm terrorists and disarm the people. And now what do we have? We have gun-free zones and where people, law-abiding citizens, die because they are disarmed, and then people are terrorized by their own government because they do not feel safe to protect themselves. And so, I don't know if you've been following other news, but in my state of Florida, there are floods happening. We're having a lot of rain, a lot of flooding going on. Flooding particularly in a place in Florida called Pasco County. And apparently we have a state of emergency in Pasco County, Florida. And somebody, a member of our Liberty First Brigade, sent me a photograph that he took in Walmart in Pasco County, Florida. And there you see a gun case in the gun section of Walmart. You know, I don't know if you've ever been to Walmart and saw their guns. They have these rotating gun cases. Encased in glass, you see these firearms. They are rifles, by the way, rifles of different caliber. And the sign says, quote, I will post this sign on my Facebook page so that you can see it. Florida, Pasco County, state of, and they misspelled emergency. They spelled emergency, energency, E-N-E-R-G-E-N-C-Y, just to be accurate so you know what I'm saying. Florida, Pasco County, state of emergency, flooding. No firearms or ammo sales until emergency is lifted. What? You have flooding. So now we can't sell firearms or ammunition? Will someone please explain to me the correlation necessary here to come to the conclusion that because there's flooding, we can't buy guns and ammunition? Well, I'll tell you why. Because before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom in Europe. You don't have an individual right to protect yourself. You don't have an individual right to protect your property or the lives of your family members. No. That's a right that belongs to the government. A right that belongs to the government so they can control what you can and cannot do. And yet, this is what we have. Walmart telling you that in a state of emergency, no firearms or ammo sales until the emergency lifted. Who told Walmart they couldn't do this? Because you see, I don't know if those of you who are not here in Florida realize, but we passed a law in Florida that said we have the right to carry our firearms. Isn't that crazy? We had to pass a law that says we have a right to carry our firearms in states of emergency. During a state of emergency, we have the right to transport our firearms without permits. That's a law. So now they're telling us in a state of emergency, we can't purchase ammunition and firearms. How does the right to transport? How does that even correlate with the right to the removal of the right to buy? And what is the correlation between flooding and a ban on firearm sales? I don't understand that. So you want to help me out? Why don't we call Walmart and ask them? I think we should call Walmart in Pasco County and ask them who gave them their directive to do that. I'll give you their number. It's 352-567-1551. I'd like to know who told Walmart that gun sales were not allowed during the state of emergency. Why don't you call Walmart headquarters, 1-800-WALMART, which is 925-6278. Ask them why Pasco County has removed the ability of people to buy our firearms and ammunition during the flooding. You can email their customer service at www.contacthelp.com. Contacthelp.com. Now, I think that this is a legitimate question for us to ask, don't you? Who told them they had to do this? Because if the government told them, then that's something that we need to be really concerned about. I will post all this on Facebook so that we can get to the bottom of this. Florida residents need to know if their Florida government is dictating this. The people of this country need to know if the feds are dictating this. Because God forbid some state of emergency come to your hometown and then they start prohibiting sales of firearms and ammunition because of a state of emergency. What type of state of emergency do you need? What exactly has to happen for a state of emergency? Well, in Boston, they declared a state of emergency during the Terrorist Act. In Ferguson, they declared a state of emergency during the riots and the protests. Does that mean if somebody's rioting and looting, now all of a sudden you cannot buy firearms and ammunition to protect yourselves? See, we need to get to the source of this. Pasco County's elimination of the people being able to buy firearms and ammunition. If it's a Walmart policy, then question Walmart on it. They're a private business. I guess they have the authority to determine that. But I suspect by the nature of this sign that this was not a Walmart policy. And we need to figure out which branch of government, which division of government has decided that states of emergency require tyranny. Is they telling us that because there's flooding, they're declaring a quasi-martial law? Because that's sort of what it looks like to me here. Quasi-martial law. And we, the people, have an obligation to get to the bottom of this.
The weapon of my choice, don't censor my voice. Hate me if you want, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crack it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none, except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Well, we have to get to the bottom of what's going on here. Because if we don't stand and defend our rights to keep and bear arms, our inherent right to life, liberty, and property, our inherent right to protect those things, then we are nothing more than slaves. Patrick Henry said, "Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel." Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it but downright force. And whenever you give up that force, you are inevitably ruined. This is Patrick Henry speaking in the Virginia Ratifying Convention on June 5th, 1788. And nobody can break it down like Patrick Henry. You see, there was this argument before the Virginia Ratifying Convention on the Bill of Rights, and one of the delegates was saying, no, we don't have to remind the people of their inherent right to keep and bear arms, because, you see, if the government gets out of control, we'll just simply engage in the right level of protest. And then we'll remove those tyrants from office via protest. And Patrick Henry so aptly responded and said, "Oh, sir, we should have fine times indeed, if to punish tyrants it were only sufficient to assemble the people. Your arms wherewith you could defend yourself are gone. Did you ever read of any revolution in a nation brought about by the punishment of those in power, inflicted by those who had no power at all?" He said this, listen, "You read of a riot act in a country which is called one of the freest in the world, where a few neighbors cannot assemble without the risk of being shot by hired soldiery. the engines of despotism. We may see such an act in America. Without the right to keep and bear arms, he's talking about. Imagine that. A situation in America where the people are disarmed and the government is selling arms to people who will actually terrorize the people. So maybe they're not paying these terrorists to shoot upon us. There's no evidence of that at the moment. But there is evidence that they are speaking to them. There is evidence that they are arming them. And so what's the difference between that engine of despotism and the other? We may see such an act in America, Patrick Henry says, if we are disarmed. Richard Henry Lee said, whereas to preserve liberty, it's essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. He says the mind that aims at a select militia must be influenced by a truly anti-Republican principle, and when we see men disposed to practice upon it whenever they can prevail, no wonder true Republicans are for carefully guarding against it. Now, he's not talking about the Republican Party. He's talking about a Republican form of government, where government is instituted among men, deriving its just power from the consent of the governed, and laws are created through equal representation of the whole body of the people. And the whole body of the people can control their government because the whole body of the people are armed and always possessing them. We have to prevent rule by a standing army. We have to prevent Congress from executing unjust and unconstitutional laws. And we are not meant to be disarmed. We are meant to possess arms to preserve liberty. It's time to start asking questions and making demands. God bless. See you tomorrow.
We came to light